This conference
short.
will now be recorded.
And I want to also say, please, before you submit any projects, feel free to contact myself and use me as a sounding board. It's We really see ourselves as partners with you in these projects, and we want to make sure that we're getting good submittals and projects that can really help move the needle in your districts. All right, with that, I'm going to get started here. So again, I'm going to be describing the process of to developing capital outlay projects. I have some basic definitions to go through with you guys, and sort of I'm going to start with letting you know more about what our perspective is and what we're looking for, as well as what your local municipalities are probably going to be looking for, as well as as well as the state who funds these capital outlay projects is looking to see. So your legislators, everybody has sort of expectations for these kinds of things, and so I'm going to start with that. Um, so for us at Main Street, really from our perspective, we want to make sure that you guys are utilizing these opportunities when it comes to capital outlay projects as ways to leverage or create more catalytic development projects. Um, Meaning that, because this is state money, your legislators, all of us are held accountable to the public, and that we are wanting to use our scarce resources in the most efficient way possible to generate the best outcomes for our communities. And so, really, what that means is also that we're not only just sort of working in a vacuum. There are lots of things that are out there going on the ground that your local legislators, your local municipal governments are being asked to invest in. And at the end of the day, we're all are expected to do the best we can with what we have. And so that's why it's really important for us to make sure we get really good projects that are submitted through our program. Um, and we want to be able to help you guys get to those points where you are able to develop those projects that make a lot of sense in terms of strategy. We want to make sure that these projects are not the only sort of kinds of investments that are happening in your community. And um, so I'm going to start describing some what do these projects look like, right? Um, so generally, these are how these kinds of projects go from the beginning. The phase one is a lot of planning and developing a design and an image or yeah a consensus around what needs to happen when we apply for capital outlay funding in public infrastructure projects. So in this phase one, it's a lot of engagement with your local government, your city councilors, your county commissioners, your mayors, and people in maybe your economic development department or planning department or your council of governments. Um, and they're engaged in this process along with your community members, your Main Street board, to really come to a consensus about what needs to happen with these kinds of projects. Um, and phase two, which I'll give a little more detail on what these kind of projects look like or end up being, is more the funding of these construction projects. Um, and so, what these kinds of projects are is usually improvements in the streets, sidewalks, and lighting, and also wayfinding projects. And the third phase, which is really where I'm coming in more in my new role here with Main Street, is to really help you guys see those investments through and see the catalytic work take place afterward. So a lot of our work, my work, is going to be working with you guys and our community revitalization specialists and identifying these projects that really can take place during or after a public infrastructure project is completed. And they're going to be around building rehabs, business development, new construction of new businesses or new buildings, those kinds of things. Other forms of investment that we want to see happen as a result of these kinds of projects taking place in your district. Okay, so qualifying in public infrastructure projects, this is just sort of like a more of a definition piece. Streets, you can have storm, sewer drainage projects. Um, those are, some of your districts, may have some infrastructure failing. Sometimes there's when it's heavy rain or storm, a main street may get shut down because there's just too much flooding, and or it stops people from wanting to go out and actually go to your restaurant. Those kinds of things. So those are kinds of street projects that could be done. Another one is, upgrading. So that would be also upgrading your sewage and utilities. Broadband connection speed. We were just in Madrid, and we are talking to their community about some work that can happen there. And we found out that there was not really good broadband connection speed. Um, these this is a clear kind of project that could be done with some of maybe some capital outlay money, but really there's other investment opportunities out there to increase broadband connectivity in your community. So there in Madrid, we even had poor connection with our cell phones there, and we're having trouble connecting. And we were in one of the businesses where they were telling us that a lot of the transactions, this was an art gallery, can be about $1,000, and sometimes they're not able to connect to the internet. And that means they could lose literally $1,000 in a sale right there. So those kinds of projects where we can make a difference like that with some public infrastructure, that's the kind of thing where we know there's going to be an impact right away. We're going to see increase in gross receipts, those kinds of things. Some other things are pedestrian safety safety sidewalk kind of improvements, curb extensions. Those are things that make your district safer, make people feel safe. If you've got a sidewalk that's only 3 feet long and you're trying to get people to walk up and down the street with their families to go shopping in the different shops, obviously it's hard to do and for people to feel safe in that area when you're right up on the traffic that's passing by. So those are kinds of improvements that would increase the sidewalk length and make it safer for the people to walk around. Of course, there's other kinds of placemaking projects where you're creating a plaza or a public space where it could be farmers markets and those kinds of things. In that case, the catalyst is that you're going to have more generated revenue through farmers markets. You're going to have more businesses in the area, and you're going to have more spaces for public events and so on. So these are some general ideas of what are kind of qualifying projects. And I'm going to go through some more specifics here in a minute. So the opportunity that we're looking for are projects that are really going to start be a catalyst for other projects to happen, for more investment into your district from different areas. It could be from your local government, it could be federal money that could be leveraged through this, foundation money as well. So we're really looking at opportunity, and so I'm going to talk about that more in the context of Morelos. So I was formerly a director for the Morelos Main Street program, and so I'm very familiar with the process there because I was also a board member for quite some time, and so I want to use this as an example. I also live in the community here, and the best way for me to kind of like give you guys a good idea of how to develop some good projects is just to use this as an example. Some of these things that I'm going to be talking about may have changed in Bartolomé Main Street. Obviously, I'm not in the Main Street program for that district. I haven't been for a little bit of time, so not everything's right up to date here. But for me, I think I want to use this as a piece to really show what we mean and how we develop the strategy and what we mean by strategy and what we're looking for when we get applications from you all. So if you see here, this is our 4th Street corridor right here going down the middle. You can see all these different projects that we have identified. This plan, cultural corridor plan, was developed with State Main Street resources. I believe Will and Charlie Deans were the ones who put together this cultural corridor plan for us. It was done through a bunch of community meetings where we sat down and actually went through all these kinds of projects ideas. And pretty much the consensus was that we want to try to bring, so just north of here where my arrow is downtown Albuquerque, and just south of here we have the National Hispanic Cultural Center, and over here to the east we have the rail yards. um, we knew that in our community these were like some of the major assets and things that were places where the city was investing money to do redevelopment, and we wanted to find ways to connect these things and create more investment within our district. The idea essentially was to get more people from downtown circulating to the Hispanic Cultural Center, and vice versa. People from the Hispanic Cultural Center. That's a, if you don't know, it's like a museum and venue for different kinds of um, concerts and things. And we wanted to make sure that we would entice people to move into the area and spend their money in our local businesses, and also create opportunities for new businesses to move in and create employment and those kinds of things. So some of the major pieces we developed was uh, a gateway project here, right here on the north end, that would allow people from downtown to see the beginning of our commercial district and try to entice them to come down through our commercial district here. We've also identified lots of different things. This is the Catholic Church, Sacred Heart Church here in the community. Here's B. Rupee's drugstore down here. I will go through some of this stuff later on. I'm just sort of giving you an overview of what's going on, and just trying to give you guys a sense of how we develop our strategy. All of you guys are probably doing this same kind of work with the kind of assets you have in your community. Um, so here is an example of that 4th Street Gateway project we're talking about. So right here we have, this is one of Will's drawings, I believe, and these are these little pillars that people were discussing in our community meetings. Right over here on 4th and Cole, I'll show you again. And this was at the time empty lot um, that the community saw a big opportunity for. So this is the Gateway project here. And what we wanted to do is like, as I said, create a way for people to recognize that this is the start of our commercial district, that it was community pride, and to entice people to come and hang out in our district. These are some representations, some other ideas that were coming up at the community meeting. And at this meeting that we used to kick off this cultural corridor plan, we had a developer come, and I think a couple of developers are there who are interested in working with us and our metropolitan redevelopment department here at the city to redevelop this empty lot. So this whole kind of process itself started to show all the different kinds of reinvestment opportunities that it could come, and how we could leverage different sources from a metropolitan redevelopment area funding, and to capital outlay. Capital outlay money would have been this uh, project right here, the Gateway project. Um, so, okay, moving forward, so this is sort of what happened after that. We still haven't gotten to this Gateway project in the community here, but we do have a Great Blocks grant right now where they will be discussing uh, the potential for a Gateway project in that process. Um, but that already resulted in a direct investment of about $8 million to build this development here. This is for a private reinvestment. Um, of course, we get all the jobs and the benefits of a new construction in the community, but also we have now all this commercial space here at the bottom. You can see this also has new housing component to it. So there'll be new residents coming in, moving into this area. This also took money from some from the city metropolitan redevelopment area. So there was already two sources of kinds of investment that were going here: 8 million from the developer himself, and I believe two to 300,000 from the local municipality, and monies that we were getting through our family community services as well as metropolitan redevelopment. So the idea was to catalyze all this work with a gateway project and this concept here, and ended up becoming part of that. Um, so that's sort of like the kinds of projects, that's the kind of thing we want to see, something that that is going to result after a public investment is made. Um, so here's another kind of project that happened on 4th Street here in Barela, so the B Rupees project. This mural here was done with, I believe it was $10,000 P&M grant, and it was part of a series of murals that had happened in the community, and we were part of. And this is of Maclovia, and sort of one of our local treasures here in Barelas. And B Rupees is one of the oldest drugstores in New Mexico. So this was some money that we got to a foundation, and this also was part of yeah, like I said, a collection of different murals that happened in the neighborhood. But I wanted to really talk about also when this kind of investment, this also like gave the impression of what an asset this was in the community. And we had worked with, we had a partner, another sort of investment that came into the community was HomeWise, who was a nonprofit who actually does housing development. And they saw the same thing we saw in this B Rupees drugstore, and that it was an anchor in the community, and it was a big asset to be able to say this is something that was run by Maclovia, who is this natural herbalist, who's sort of well known for her work. And so they invested and bought this property, and they and put a lot of money into revitalizing the store and rehabbing the store, and they opened up the windows and did these kinds of things. And really, um, what we always planned in Barolos was to have another public infrastructure investment project right here where we would have some kind of curb cut or a bulk pedestrian, public safety or pedestrian safety project where we would make an easier crossing for the street right there. Also vacate this alleyway that you can see here on the side of the building. The idea would be to pave over the lot, over that, the alleyway, and have whatever business come in there into this B Rupees drugstore, be it a coffee shop or something else, invest into making this like a little garden and more of an outdoor patio space. We're also planning to do another mural here on this side. So here's sort of just in this picture you can see, all right, pedestrian safety kind of work that the public can invest in that'll entice a private business to then improve the sidewalk streetscape by creating an outdoor cafe kind of concept. And then we would also, as a nonprofit, put in money to get another mural done that'll improve the alleyway. Um, so those are the kinds of things that we want you to think about when you're applying for a project. Again, this takes years of development of building these partnerships and relationships with HomeWise, with our city councilor who already agreed he would vacate the alley. Um, and over time, we know because we have all these things lined up that once we invest into this public infrastructure project here in this alleyway, all these other things would come together and happen to make this complete and make a transformational change. Here's some other things that we talked about, some other examples. Here's Sacred Heart Church is one of our churches here in Morelos. Is really well known. It's really a draw for the community because it brings in people from all different kinds of neighborhoods around here. Um, and so this street right now is it's a regular street. We talked about turning this into a plaza concept where we would raise the street so that way it'd be easier to cross around and make it a little more comfortable for cars to get through so they won't want to speed through it. And we want to make it a little more comfortable for people to walk around. We were of course considering special pavers and those kinds of things, and we felt that this space right here, this plaza, would also reinforce the sort of the identity of the community and create this public space, outdoor space, where we can have more events like our annual fiestas and those kinds of things here, which would create obviously vending opportunities on its own. Here in this, you can't really see it in this little drawing here, but there is some buildings here that the city owns, and we've discussed in discussions with our local city councilor about this and tried to bring it to the attention of the mayor and those kinds of things. And so there's been a lot of work put into this already. And this is also within our Great Blocks project here in Barelas. And this is something that will be part of the process and discussion. But the idea is with this little city building here is to create more vending spaces and places for businesses to to start up and have a little incubation program that will run along with it. A smaller project that we have been talking about is, here's a picture of this old Route 66 and El Camino Real scenic byway sign that's here in Morelos. It always kind of drives me crazy to see those things like that in the shape. But here's a smaller project that could be an easier, but can make and have an impact as well. So if we refresh these signs or come up with a better wayfinding project that connect us to, because Route 66 runs through downtown Albuquerque, through a number of different historic neighborhoods here in Albuquerque, and the National Scenic Byway El Camino Real runs north through that same similar path as well. And this would be a public infrastructure kind of project, a wayfinding project that would help direct people through the area, maybe direct tourists through our neighborhood, our corridor, and into other corridors that celebrate the history and unique assets of our places, and represents, again, a smaller investment that then brings on new revenue and business opportunities to the community. And so these are the kinds of ways that we want folks to be thinking in. When you're thinking about your capital outlay projects and great block projects. So great block projects comes with a different set of expectations. We want to see more of a 3 or 5 year kind of commitment from your local government and other private sector stakeholders that you may have engaged, whether it be foundations as well or other nonprofits. This is really important because these kinds of projects, they take a long time. So this is like 7, 8 years or more in the making than what I just went through in terms of what's been going on in Morelos. It's really important to have these discussions with your local city councilor and local electeds, so they know what's going on, and also people within your local government departments, so they also know what's going on and they understand how much work is taking place. And also, you want to build relationships with your private sector, like I was just explaining with that Fourth and Cole project, to Color Lofts. That was that developer was part of some initial meetings that we had, among some others, and this helped to increase their interest in the project. And it took about 5 years, and it's still ongoing, that project. So it takes a lot of focus, it takes a lot of commitment, and 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 really, it really takes building um, consensus with different stakeholders, so that way they know that and they know that this is a long-term kind of project, and that's something we want to see from you guys. Um, so we also want to make sure that you're utilizing our resources here through New York to Main Street. We want to make sure that you're speaking to me. Please, again, this is a part of this presentation is really for me to get introduced to you all, and for you guys to feel comfortable with me, and to reach out to me so you can run these ideas by me, and I can help you strategize and create these concepts and really engage the appropriate people within your local city leadership, county leadership, your council of governments, your foundations, or your private businesses and your developers, to make sure we're strategizing and making the most of these opportunities for you all when you are applying for these funds. Again, I'm going to try to keep myself contained here. Okay. So, so we want to make sure that really the biggest things are, we want to make sure that you're not just looking at our funding, because we are dealing with limited resources, as the only source of funding for your projects. We want to see that you are utilizing other opportunities. Earlier, I was giving you examples of different kinds of mural projects, investment from nonprofits in buying a building, to working with a local developer to invest to create a new development project in our community. We want to see these investments that we provide you guys from our capital outlay funds are coinciding or making use of other funding sources, and other opportunities that exist within your community of stakeholders and organizations. All right, so I'll do some quick qualifying community information and things you should know about an application process outside of what I was just discussing about leveraging. Um, your main street has to have a full-time director. Um, you have to have local government partner who's willing to secure funds for these projects. Um, you have to have no public infrastructure funds that are unspent. There's sort of a caveat to that, and I'll get back to that in a second. Um, uh, um, some other things you need to be aware of is that really you want to make sure that you haven't reverted any funds. So an issue that has come up in the past is that some projects get started in some areas, and then the funding goes back. So when you receive a capital outlay grant and the money doesn't get spent down, the project is not completed, that money can be subject to be pulled back to the state. So we really that's a really big key for us. So that's where we really want to know that there's a lot of commitment from your local government partner. And sometimes you have the commitment up front, but your local city manager may be overloaded with lots of different kinds of projects, and we want to make sure that this is staying a priority with them. Um, you also need to have a clean audit from your local government partner. We don't invest directly into Main Street programs with these funds. These funds have to go to your local government partner. Um, again, so when you're submitting the application, make sure that you're really articulating how these projects are tying into your master redevelopment plan or your metropolitan redevelopment plan. How to contribute to your economic transformation strategies that you guys are focused on. If it's a Great Blocks project, make sure you're thinking about a 2-3 block area that's within it, this consecutive blocks that are ripe for redevelopment. Because we really want to see these funds are really going to make transformational change. And to do that, we need to make sure that it's all in one specific area and it doesn't just start to have a little mission creep and start moving into different areas. We want to see a concerted effort and concerted sort of strategy that you guys have been working on. And if you're just applying for one specific smaller project, you want to see how that project is going to be leveraged. So I gave that example of signage earlier on 4th Street where we could do a wayfinding project and you know that people are going to be coming to the area because they might be following that trail of Route 66 to different communities and those kinds of things. We want to see that you're able to articulate what the benefit is and what other kinds of investments are going to be coming out of it. Um, other things you need to be able to provide is an overlay aerial view of the community. Um, we want to know the context. So we also want to know historic district boundaries, if there is one. What other kind of historical cultural properties may exist? So like in my example earlier, if it was Sacred Heart Church, it's the Hispanic Cultural Center. We want to know where these things are in your community and how this capital outlay investment is really going to leverage those things as well. So using your assets and into working in towards getting more investment from the private sector. And make sure you highlight specific building renovations and rehabilitation opportunities within this district. Make sure you talk about, okay, well, this project will um, show that the local community is invested into this area, wants to see things change here, and could entice a local developer to rehabilitate this building, which has these kinds of potentials as a brewery or a coffee shop. Um, Make sure you're highlighting other projects. So if you've done a mural project that you've had another entity already invest in, such as an arts program or PNM or somebody like that had created a mural for you guys on a building and show us how it's being leveraged with other things that are going on in the community. Um, and because I think a really strong application is going to be one that is showing us that this is not just a one-off project that's going to be done and nothing else will happen. We want to see that it's part of a strategy, and also definitely talk to us about how this would be part of your business development strategy based on your economic transformation strategies. All right, so some final thoughts here as I'm running out of time. I would like to tell you just to remember that these are really targeted kinds of investments that will make positive change in your community. Um, it's not important just for us as a Main Street program to show that we're investing in your communities and into spaces and opportunities that really have that chance to be a catalyst in that community. It's also really important for you guys as well, working with your local municipalities, your county, your foundations, your city. They need to know that these investments that they're making is resulting in more investment outside of just what their program is providing to you. So just make sure that there is time spent on understanding how this is part of a larger strategy. Um, Make sure that you feel that you do just reach out to myself and other revitalization specialists. We want to help you navigate these application processes and also just really help you incubate some ideas for these projects. So please reach out for me. I'll have my contact information at the end of this here. Um, and we will may guide you into one concept project or another, depending on and right now we're making decisions about how the funding that we do have right now is going to be spent. So some things may go to great blocks, some may be set aside for smaller projects that are not as comprehensive. Um, so like I said, in the future we will soon be announcing a application webinar for the project for capital outlay. So right now we don't have a due date for the capital outlay projects, um, but we do know that we do have 1.5 million set aside. The sales of the bonds are set to be done in September or August. So that means as soon as we make our decisions, we will be coming. We'll be working with Julie on putting together an agreement, and we could talk more about that as we get to closer to when and we're to creating actual pre-application webinar. Um, and so the 1.5 million that we do have is to plan, design, and construct infrastructure projects and improvements in the Main Street districts and local arts and cultural districts statewide. Um, the focus is on capital outlay investments um, to leverage economic redevelopment, projects that have significant community stakeholder and local government participation. That's really important, guys, because that's what helps these projects move through the end of because they're going to take a while, and you need to have people engaged to make sure that they get done. Um, and people who submit projects that can really articulate really well how these investments will catalyze other investments from other sources. And again, my role here is to help you guys create those strategies and identify other opportunities to get other investments. Okay. Another thing to keep in mind is that we do require a minimum 20% match for every project that we fund. So this is again another reason why you need a local government partner or another partner to invest in the projects. We do accept some in-kind contributions, um, but again, these are things that if we should be working on together, meaning myself and you guys. Please reach out to me, and this is something that I would love to be a part of the development of these kinds of projects. Um, Again, my name is Lucas Pedraza. I'm the program coordinator for New Mexico Main Street. Here is my number and phone number and email. Please do not hesitate to reach out to me. And I look forward to hearing from you all. So I will hand this back over to Eduardo so he can tell you more about the New Mexico Resiliency Alliance opportunity coming up. But also, I don't know if we're gonna take questions now or we're gonna wait to the end. I think we said we're gonna wait to the end, right? Or how do you want to
Yeah, I
do it?
think so, Lucas.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll just take care of it all at the end.
Okay.
So I'm going to jump in with the Resiliency Alliance updates. And so I think I've got my slides on screen now. Okay, so yeah, I think Lucas talked about his presentation was not a pre-application webinar, and they will do that one pre-application workshop before the capital outlay. This one for the Resiliency Alliance kind of has turned into a pre-application workshop. So thank you all, those of you who are still with us, hanging in there. I'll try and move to the content quickly because I think you'll probably have some questions at the end. But just a little bit of feedback on the Alliance. So the Alliance was created in 2014 as a replacement to the Friends of New Mexico Main Street. And at that time, the New Mexico Main Street was shutting down, or the Friends of New Mexico Main Street was shutting down. The Alliance was starting to kind of take its place. So the Alliance basically, its role and its mission is to mobilize and leverage resources to enhance economic vibrancy and quality of life for the residents of New Mexico. And I think it's important, not only do we have a very strong partnership and a role with New Mexico Main Street, but the Alliance's mission also extends beyond Main Street districts as well. Important and central to our work is the concept of resiliency, and we define resiliency as the capacity to respond effectively to change. It is asset-based and strengths-based, just like New Mexico Main Street as well. We also define that as the ability to adapt to unforeseen conditions and circumstances, and we certainly have that going on right now with the public health crisis. And then finally, that a community has the opportunities to flourish when they do adapt, and that's part of central to our definition as well. Right? So resilient community is aware of their assets and have the capacity to utilize those assets to build community while adapting to socioeconomic conditions and sustain economic activity. I think for us, one of our primary focus areas of how we do this is through the Resilient Communities Fund, and that's what I'll be talking about today. And so that's a fund created at the Alliance to provide support for locally driven community economic development projects around the state. And almost 100%, more than 95% of our funded projects have been to New Mexico Main Street affiliate programs. So here's a little bit of where our projects have been funded since 2014. You'll see the map in the map. The solid red dots is a community or project that received one grant, and then those with a red circle and a different color center of the dot has received more than one grant since 2014. You'll notice by the pie chart on the left that primarily Main Street communities, most of the funding has gone this time to design projects, facade squads, facade improvements, placemaking projects, public art, etc. And then close to equal amount promotion projects, organizational capacity building projects, and economic vitality projects as well, right? And so you get a good sense of where the funding has been. Over $300,000 in grants awarded since that time, and close to about $1 million. We're about to hit the $1 million mark, and how much additional funding we've been leveraging and you've been leveraging through these projects as well, right? So let's talk about who's eligible this year for this year's funding. Accredited Main Street programs, affiliate Main Street programs, and if you're at an affiliate level, you want to reach out to Daniel and to Lucas to talk about your project before you submit a proposal as well. Arts and cultural districts, including startups, and then the four active frontier or Native American community projects, so Laguna Pueblo, Lordsburg, Picudas Pueblo, and Poaki as well. So that's who's eligible this year. And this year we only have funding set aside for Main Street communities or Main Street affiliate communities, we continue to look for funding for other projects outside the Main Street community as well. Right? A little bit about sort of the general specifications of applying for the grant. Its funding is available by application only, and this has to do with sort of the regulations that govern the Alliance's work and how we distribute grants, and mostly the IRS regulations, right? We look for proposals that have very specific performance measures and focus on the outcomes as part of their outcomes, and as part of the sort of the ranking process as well. And I'll tell you a little bit about that here shortly as well, right? And then the grants that we make basically reflect an alignment with the Alliance's mission and strategy. So if you're unfamiliar to the Resiliency Alliance, I suggest you spend a little bit of time on there, taking a look at their website, nmresiliencyyalliance.org, and just get some information on their background. So your request for funding should also align with those mission and priorities. We look for projects that leverage capacity via partnerships or sharing of human or financial resources as part of the ranking process as well. And then a little bit about the ranking process is that when applications come in, they go into 3 people. The New Mexico Main Street team has put together a review team that includes both board members of the Alliance, revitalization specialists, and New Mexico Main Street staff. I'm the treasurer of the Alliance, but I am not part of the review team. I am not, do not participate in the vote as well on the funding. So I'll talk a little bit about my role here shortly. So the grants are coordinated through New Mexico Main Street. When you submit a proposal, the grant recommendation to the Alliance board may be less than what you asked for. And if that's the case and the Alliance board approves it, then Daniel or I or Lucas will reach out to you and say, do we need to amend the scope of services, or can you still do the project at the lesser funded amount? For all the Main Street projects, the funding is coupled with New Mexico Main Street technical assistance provided by the resource revitalization specialist, right? Some of the other requirements to receive the funding, you must be a legally compliant 501c3, which means you have to have your IRS 990 submitted. You have to have your registration with the Attorney General and the Secretary of State also up to date, right? If not, you can submit a proposal, but you have to submit that the funding has to go through a fiscal agent as well. You have to meet the eligibility criteria, and so we talked a little bit about that earlier. I'll talk about that again shortly, but I think some of the things that Lucas talked about earlier is that you have to really be in good standing with the New Mexico Main Street program as well. We want you to know that the funding that we're disseminating is also emanating from a different source. So we have a funder that we're working with, and we align our funding and our sub-grants to their goals as well. So we're looking at economic development projects. We're looking at underserved communities, which is basically all of your Main Street districts that are engaged in revitalization process. We're looking at rural communities that are looking to revitalize their communities, and then capacity building work as well, right? We ask that all the projects are completed by the deadlines, and so I'll talk a little bit, and this has a red asterisk. You'll see these throughout the presentation because there's some potential changes to these requirements this year, right? But generally speaking, the projects must be completed by December 31st of each year. We ask you to spend the funds for the intended uses. So when you submit a proposal, you get a grant award, we want you to spend the funds for what you proposed the work to do. The Alliance doesn't look into to receive any unspent funds back. And so if you have changes, please just let us know. You'll coordinate that with Lucas, you'll coordinate with me, and so that we're able to kind of monitor all that and help you move forward in that space. But generally speaking, we want you to spend the money for what you received it. We do have, if you receive an award, a grant terms and conditions that you have to agree to. We ask grantees to not only just sign it and send it back, but to monitor their compliance with the grant terms and conditions during the life of the grant period as well. And then we expect communities to also comply with the reporting, the collection of leverage and match commitments, and I'll talk about that a little bit more as well. But the leverage and match commitments were also listed in the funding criteria document that Daniel sent out. Right? So you have to be in good standing with New Mexico Main Street. I already talked about that one. We do ask for a 1-to-1 match for the project, with at least half of that match being cash and the other can be in-kind resources or other resources. And again, I'll talk about some flexibility that we might be creating with that match requirement this year. Recurring projects are not eligible for funding in consecutive years. So if you received a project for a placemaking project, received funding for a placemaking project last year, you couldn't come back and ask for more money for that same project this year. These are intended to be seed grants, and the Alliance hopes that you're using them as sort of a match partner, as opposed to let's submit a proposal and go see if we can find the match funding as well. Right? You're not eligible for funding if you haven't completed a project in the previous year that was funded in the previous year. And I'll talk a little bit about some changes there. Any grantees reverting money from the previous grants basically have to take a 1-year waiting period before they apply for funding for a different project. Generally speaking, the awards are around $2,500 to $5,000. As I mentioned, they're seed grants. They help to get some projects started, some visible projects in the community. Last year, the Alliance Board voted to approve up to 2 proposals with a maximum of $10,000. And for these, basically, you would want to show a very strong and direct economic impact in your proposal. And then there is a preference, and there is actually a line on the proposal that says there's a preference around, is your board 100% financially invested in your organization, which means have they made an annual donation to your organization? This is something you see in every foundation, just about every foundation grant is something that we have to report to our funders as well. And so when you check that box, you should not check that lightly. If your board members have not made donations, we don't ask to set a minimum amount. It could be $5, it could be $5,000, but we expect to see at least all your board members contributing financially to your project, to your work, right? And then you have to agree with the grants and terms and conditions letter, and those go out with the awards. For those of you who were with us in Tucumcari, we talked about this a little bit in that day at the Main Street Conference in Tucumcari last October. These are some of the things we hope for, right? Plan ahead. Apply for the funding only if you're really ready for that, right? So if you have a project lined up, you have some match funding, you're ready to go. If you're looking at projects right now that you haven't been thinking about in the past, then it's probably not going to be a real strong proposal. We are making some changes to what we're asking you to do this year as well. You should be asking if it's an economic development project or a design project or an organization project. You should be asking your revitalization specialist from New Mexico Main Street to help you and help inform the final submission of the proposal. We want clearly articulated proposals with clear goals and tasks and impacts and how you're going to use the funds, right? We don't want to need to spend a whole lot of time and energy creating language around rationale and background for us. We want to get, it's a short application, it's a simple application. We really want to understand quickly what you're trying to accomplish. We have been looking for, as you saw the earlier slide, quite many design projects that we've been funding since 2014. We have been looking for a lot more economic vitality projects that help build economic resiliency or impact with economic vitality works. We do ask you to follow through on your impact measures, and I'll talk about that when we get to the application process as well. we do like to see projects that are going to last, right? And so in the past, we've seen funded projects for, say, facade improvement on a building, and then 3 months later, the business closed and the building went vacant for another 10 months, right? So we like you to think about those things when you're considering projects. How are you vetting what you're proposing internally so that the project lasts and there's some lasting impact to that as well. This year in particular, we're going to be reaching out to you on a regular basis to share what you're learning, because there are some adjustments to the funding criteria this year. And so if you're finding something is working well with a funded project, we're going to ask you to share that on a relatively timely basis so that we can share that with other communities who could benefit from that information as well. In the past, and with the exception this year, these are the 8 areas, the priority areas that the New Mexico Resiliency Alliance is looking for proposals in: community and economic development, design and placemaking projects, arts, cultural and creative economy, including cultural preservation, urban planning projects, capacity building. These are usually matching grants for a new fundraising activity, branding, marketing, and promotion and activities. And then the last 2, we don't see a whole lot of in Main Street community, but these are still have been priorities for the Resiliency Alliance: enhancing food security, community-supported agriculture, co-ops, etc., and then civic engagement projects. And so these have always been the Alliance's funding priorities. We did make an adjustment this year. And so what's happening with the public health crisis right now created a whole new set of challenges for everybody in this work. And so 2 weeks ago, Daniel pulled together his team and put together some ideas around how we might consider using this year's grants to respond to what's happening right now. He presented that information to the board of the Resiliency Alliance. They voted in approval. Here are the funding priority areas that we're looking at for this year, specifically this year, right? Economic development, economic vitality projects that demonstrate an immediate and positive impact to either support or stabilize small businesses in the district. We're seeing almost immediately coffee shops, restaurants, pubs, and other businesses that are closing are already starting to dismiss staff, and it's having a cascade impact in the community. So economic vitality projects that respond to those criteria and are already listed in your board adopted economic transformation strategies, if you're a Main Street or an arts and cultural district organization, definitely high priority. Any new or innovative economic vitality projects that show the same impact but might not be listed in your current economic transformation strategies. We know this is a unique situation for all of us right now, what everybody is dealing with. And so if we see proposals that were already in your ETS that support this response, great, but we'll also looking at newer innovative ones as well. And then any design marketing projects that demonstrate a direct and immediate impact to what we're seeing right now in the Main Street districts, right? And so and I'll talk a little bit about what's been deprioritized. Finally, the fourth one, projects that enhance food security for local residents, while also demonstrating immediate and positive impact to support or stabilize the businesses in the community, right? And so those are the 4 areas that we're really looking at this year and hoping to receive proposals for. In that process, the New Mexico Main Street and the Alliance Board sort of set a lower priority on other design and urban planning projects, facades, quads, green spaces, other promotion projects, not prioritizing capacity building or civic engagement projects at this time, and then sort of new business development, new expansions or relocation projects. So lower priority. If you feel like this is an area you feel that you really want to submit a proposal in, then go ahead. But I just want to give you a heads up at the ranking, in the ranking process, those will probably have a lesser priority. The ranking team, I think I mentioned New Mexico Main Street staff and specialists and a couple of members of the Alliance Board. Last week and into this week, the New Mexico Main Street team together and put together some ideas on things, new and innovative projects that you might want to consider. Crowdfunding campaigns for your local businesses. Amy Barnhart has some information on the GoFundMe has started a small business relief fund. And so maybe you can help your local businesses not only access that, but apply for alliance funding to help amplify those crowdfunding campaigns. Start or amplify local gift card programs and maybe even match with loyalty card programs so that you can see the impact directly. Businesses need an influx of resources right now when they don't have customers. So a gift card program is a great way to get put some cash in those businesses. And for those restaurants or other businesses that can get products out quickly, maybe a loyalty program kind of helps keep that moving right now. Anything virtual marketplaces, so e-commerce websites or online services for those businesses like yoga studios or spas that provide services, anything that they can do online, you might want to consider applying for a grant for that. Anything around supporting current delivery services, whether that's packaging for products or equipment to help them to sanitize their delivery service or make it more accessible to the community, and maybe even for our rural community, sort of even thinking about launching local delivery services, a local rural version of Uber Eats or Grubhub, right? Helping transition farmers markets so that they can get, obviously, around the state, everybody is shut down and can't have convenings of large groups of people. So how to build supply chains and help farmers markets transition their product from a space-based delivery to maybe other options to their consumers as well. And then specific supports for business themselves, they either through a sub-grant with this money or directly to them, inventory assistance supports, rent abatement, emergency operating funds for recurring costs, things like insurance or internet or telephones. Those recurring costs aren't going away even though the business may be shut down as well, right? We put together a little bit more details on each of these. I'll be happy to send these out to the network list after today's presentation. So those will come out. These are just ideas for you to think about. We don't feel like you need to follow these ideas. If you have some good positive approaches that work in your community, some things that you're already thinking about, then don't feel like they have to align with these sort of sample projects as well, right? And then in the other areas in promotion and design, any advertising or marketing or social media messaging that helps businesses deal with what they're dealing with right now or in the recovery process, any design or reconfiguration of physical spaces so that it helps with delivery and or consumer access to those affected businesses would also be considered, right? So while we might not have facade squads as a priority, it doesn't mean that design projects are totally out of the picture as well, right? So think about those projects as well. I think in the ranking process, so those proposals will come into Daniel, myself, and Lucas. Daniel will lead and Lucas will lead the review and the recommendation process. I handle the administrative work, right? So some of the things you want to think about when you submit a proposal, if you have a project that's serving 5 or 6 or 8 businesses benefit from that process, is probably going to show a greater impact than a project that just supports one business, okay? Projects that can start quickly are probably going to get some priority review. So you want to think about how, when you submit your proposal, how you share this information. We're ready to go. We're dealing with some challenges right now, and I think projects that wait till late to the summer or the fall to get started are probably just not going to be as attractive to the review team. We want to look at, are you have clearly identify your indicators of success, right? And then how you're going to measure those. And it just might be your indicator of success might be we're helping these 3 businesses stay open for another 3 weeks to fill that gap to help in that recovery process, right? But you want to clearly identify those. Projects that leverage other financial resources from funders, partners, or collaborators to maximize the impact definitely are much more attractive. And just so you know, the Alliance also has to report to its funders leverage matches as well. And so this is why we look for you to do the same. And then projects that are already engaging or will engage at a strong level, the New Mexico Main Street Revitalization Specialist. We found that when you're engaging the specialist in the project, they seem to move and they move to success and have really strong outcomes as well. So those are kind of some of the factors that the review team looks at when they're reviewing your proposals. Let's talk about what changed this year, right? Organizations with previously funded projects that maybe have not yet been completed will be eligible this year to apply, right? And so if you got funding last year and you weren't able to finish the project because of, for whatever reason, you would generally not be able to apply this year. This year we have removed that requirement, right? We wanted to see be able to support the communities with where they are, in especially dealing with what's happening with the public health crisis. The reporting deadlines may be adjusted. We're working with our funders as well about what's going to happen at the end of the year, but we'll still need progress reports at the end of December, right? There's likely going to be some flexibility with the resource matching requirements identified in the funding criteria. I can't say that we're removing that altogether because, again, I previously said that those that leverage matching funds are probably going to look more attractive to the review team. And then Frontier and Native American community projects, they can propose projects in the lower priority categories that will be considered on a case-by-case basis. I strongly recommend if you're looking at a design or a placemaking project, you're one of those Native American or Frontier community projects, that you reach out to Lucas and to Daniel before you submit your proposal, just so you get some feedback on that one. Right? A little bit on the deadline. So the application that Daniel sent out a couple of weeks ago had an April 9th submission deadline. We've extended that a couple of weeks, so it's effectively about a month from now. Soon after that, Daniel will put together, and Lucas will put together the review team, and they'll review the applications and create a funding recommendation docket for the Alliance Board to review, right? A couple of days after that, we're hoping the Alliance Board will process the recommendations and the grant docket. Most of the time, those are accepted without any challenges. Once in a while, there's some discussion about the amount recommended for a specific grant and or negotiating sort of some of the project details as well. Again, if if the recommendation is lower than what you're asking for, we will, both the New Mexico Main Street team and I will connect with you on the back end to find out if you're still ready to do that project at a lower funding level as well. I'll send the notifications probably by May 1st that you received an award. I will send the grant terms and conditions letter. Once I get those back, the checks will be sent out, right? And we want to move this process as quickly as possible. That gives you May to December to work on the project. If you're starting your project again in August, September, October, it's probably not going to be as attractive to the review team, right? Work with your specialist to help move that project forward. Historically, we've asked that the projects are completed and the funds spent by December 31st. And if you need an extension, you have to request that formally by that date, right? We might make some adjustments to that reporting date, and I'll talk about that here as well shortly. And then we do need to have final reports due to the Alliance or a progress report if you get an extension by mid-January. And that's because we have to prepare reports as well to our funders, right? I want to give Daniel an opportunity to jump in with some of the updates from the New Mexico Main Street program that aligned before I jump into the project itself. So, Daniel, I don't know if you are. Can we hear you?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes.
All right. So thanks, Eduardo, and hello all. And I know it's been a while since we've all kind of talked face to face. I hope you guys have been getting my emails that are going out, just trying to keep people up to date with what's going on. But one of the things I wanted to just touch base with first was I sent an email out earlier today about the Buy Today for Tomorrow marketing program. Eduardo and some of the suggestions for projects that the EV team came up with did focus on the putting together a gift card program. And I just wanted to point everybody to the email I sent earlier, or remind everybody to really look through it. And the whole idea is the department is trying to work, and this came from our cabinet secretary, to work to promote local businesses and help them get through these tough times, because they're having a hard time. I mean, there's a lot of loan programs out there that are you can access actually through loan guarantees through the EDD program, through the Small Business Administration. But I know loans ain't for every business, especially now when they're still trying to just make payroll and do a lot of other things. So we're trying to figure out ways that we can help push people towards local businesses that to increase both online sales and the purchase of gift cards, so that they could basically buy today and use it tomorrow. We are looking to release the website next week, or at least open it up. And the email I sent out had the link to the websites on there. And I also want to make sure folks know that we are open as the Mexico Main Street team to help any local Main Street business that doesn't have a very robust online presence right now develop a basic website, get a PayPal account going and up on their website, so they can start creating mechanisms so they can accept or deliver or offer gift cards as folks start going to look at the local programs. And I believe the website is going to be identify businesses regionally, so you can look to how you can promote your business or support local businesses near you. So I just want to get that out there. Feel free to call me if you have any questions, if you have any potential businesses that you think wants to participate and they need some help. Send me, Lucas, and an email directly, and I'll assign somebody to help that business. So when you contact me via email, send me their phone number and contact information, email as well, and then we'll get somebody to help them right away. The goal is we're trying to get 100 businesses up on the website before it goes public. I mean, it's open now, but we're not advertising it because businesses can go there to sign up. But we're hoping to get at least 100 businesses on there. And the cabinet secretary really wants to focus on Main Street business, because we know we have access connecting to local businesses through all of you guys and the work you do in your community. So again, feel free to contact me directly if you have any questions, and send me emails with contact information if people need help. Aside from that, I think right now is just a tough time in terms of funding for all of us, not only for our local businesses, but finding money is going to be for our operations for all of our communities. So I think right now more than ever, we really have to focus and show our worth to our local governments, to me for our cabinet secretary and governor. And I think just focusing on EV projects right now is what we really have to not only think about long term, but being strategic in terms of how we do it, and really trying to support these local businesses through these tough times. So that is going to be our priority. And I understand, we still have to do our regular work, but again, even if we're doing design, promo projects, they still should be geared towards helping local businesses, because we have a limited amount of funding, and we have to make the most impact we can with that through the Resiliency Alliance. And I think talk to your EV team is all they're all available to talk through projects, and Lucas is as well, the rest of our revitalization specialists, in terms of how you want to gear your projects. But I know Eduardo did mention that we will have we will be as flexible as we can in terms of reporting deadlines and other and spending out the funds, but we really have to focus on, and I would really push folks towards projects that can start right away, get to our communities and that are actually spent out by the end of the year, because they are going to be the most attractive, I think, to the board, because we still want to go after additional funding, and we have to show that that money is getting used, it's being put to work, and I think it'll set us up in the future for other funding that we can move to our communities. So I think that's all I had. Feel free to call me if you have any questions. I think I thank you, Eduardo and Lucas, in terms of just going through the process. And I think the whole goal now is just to get people to think more strategically when we're applying for projects, when we're developing projects, and not waiting till a funding opportunity comes up and then writing a grant at the last minute. And trust me, I've read hundreds of them, and you can tell which ones were well thought out, which ones you've been working with revitalization specialists and the state program prior to actually putting the grant together. We can tell, just to let you know, we can tell, and we know what who's been talking to who, and the ones that are well thought out, planned in the future, those are the ones that tend to get funded and at a higher level. So FYI, just to all of you, just please work with folks, talk them through, make sure they're really strong projects, because I want it to be a hard decision, and I want to have even projects that we may not have enough to fund just for these, through this 50,000 that we have through the New Mexico Resiliency Lines. I want to have additional projects I can take to New Mexico Gas, I can take to other funders to show, hey, we got these in the pipeline. Can we get some extra funding? So again, I'm looking for some strong projects and some really creative ideas on how to help our local communities. That's all I have. So thanks all, and I'll stay around if there's questions at the end of the webinar.
Okay, I'm going to real quick just go through a couple of pieces on the application before we open up for questions. We're not posting this application on the Alliance website, so if you haven't seen it, there's our email addresses at the top of that screen. Feel free to send us an email and let us know. And so the application is created so that you can fill it out. It's a Word document that you can fill it out. You can just check the boxes as you go through. The whole first section is the applicant information, whether you're a C3 or a fiscally sponsored project, and then your affiliation, right? You can check several of these if you're a joint accredited Main Street program in an arts and cultural district. Your organization name and address. This is a text box in here. You could just fill in all the information on one line. We need a contact, a name, and an email address, and then your federal tax ID number, EIN number, and your state corporation ID number. If you're working through a fiscal agent, we need the same information for that entity as well, including telephone numbers. At the end of this section, there's a question about, are you in good standing with the Secretary of State and the Attorney General? And I emphasize the "and" part on this one. So we usually see a couple of these a year where the registration with the Secretary of State is completed, but not the Attorney General. And so don't answer yes. We do kind of just confirm these before the grants go out, unless you have both of those done. If you have a no, just explain why, and then we'll kind of work through that process as well, right? We do ask the question, are your board members financially invested in the organization, i.e. they provide an annual contribution, right? As I mentioned earlier, we don't ask for how much those are, but we want to see that as kind of a door. And I think it's important to take that seriously. If your board members have not provided a contribution, you can say no, and you can provide an explanation, right? Then we get to the project itself. A short project title will be helpful for us because that's what we put in the award letters. How much you're requesting. Remember the criteria said, generally speaking, 2,500 to 5,000 max, and maybe a couple of bigger ones that works well. What priority areas? So obviously economic development is at the top right now. Civic engagement, we probably is one of those deprioritized items, but remember that the criteria changed after we shared this application, right? So you just fill these out. If you hit a couple of them, you might just list them that way. In the scope of work, 200 word limit. We don't need a lot of verbiage here, but we want you to get to the point, right? What's the need you're trying to deal with? What are you going to do where is this going to happen, and who you engage in to do the work, right? Simple, straightforward, but if it's easy for us to really understand what you're trying to get done, this is helpful. And then how are you going to use the money, right? It's going to be a little bit different from the scope of work. You're going to tell us, oh, we're going to buy gift cards, or we're using this for paint to paint the front of the building, right? The intended use of funds also shows up in your award letter. Then there's a whole section on average and leverage resources, estimate how many volunteer hours. So you can click on this box and enter the number of hours here, estimate the matching funds that you've either already got committed or that you're expected to get for this work, in kind, and any partners that are supporting the project, right? We ask you to enter some short information here about how are you going to track and report those leverage resources, right? And so most everybody says, oh, just an Excel spreadsheet. Really, we're trying to understand, okay, we're tracking volunteer hours and the funds that are allocated by a partner for this project. That's what you want to list here as well. How are you tracking and managing that? Short 50 words on who benefits from the project and how. And again, going back to the funding criteria, remember that I said those projects that look like they have a much stronger performance with multiple businesses or a greater number of residents in the community are probably going to get some additional attention, right? The expected completion date, this has always been December 31st. In previous years, I've already talked about how we might want to flex that, but as Daniel said, we want to support those projects that can move now. What's the impact of the project, right? And so there are 3 questions here. How does this project support your transformation strategies if you're a Main Street or an arts and cultural district community? Or how does it support your community economic development goals if you're a frontier or native community, right? Not a lot of language here needed, but just direct and to the point. What are your outcomes? And again, if you have questions about the difference between outputs and outcomes, let us know. We'll be happy to help you with that process. And then how are you going to evaluate the project effectiveness? And I think we only have 100 words here, but this one is extremely important this year so that we understand this is the impact of this project on what we're trying to accomplish with the 4 new priorities this year. And then how do you intend to communicate your impact with everybody else in the community? Finally, there's a question at the bottom that defines how the Alliance looks at resiliency, and we want you to prepare a message to the board, 100-word limit, right? Here's how we feel this project will support your definition of resiliency, right? So this is an important piece for us as we share our reporting and our outputs and our outcomes with our funders as well. So again, the deadline for submission is not April 9th, it is April 23rd. If you have any questions about the proposal itself, feel free to reach out to Lucas or Daniel or myself, but we strongly recommend that you reach out to your revitalization specialist on the project development and the proposal development so that they've seen it ahead of time when we go from there. That's all I have on the presentation and the application. I'm going to try and hit the unmute all button in case anybody has any questions. Pause for a second before you jump in, and when you do, just tell us your name and where you are. Ask the question, or you can also enter a question into the chat function of the webinar. So I'm going to hit unmute all and open it to questions. Do we have any questions?
Hello? Hello?
Yes.
Oh, hi,
Go
this
ahead.
is Bianca. Hi, how are you doing?
Hi, Bianca.
I wasn't sure if you could hear me. Sorry, I called in on the phone. Just wanted to say it was a good presentation, and I think I got it all. I just wanted to clarify one thing just to make sure. So we had received a New Mexico Resiliency Grant last year. So what you were basically saying is that since we completed it, And there is, like all projects, there's always different phases to it, right? So basically, we wouldn't be able to apply for that project because you already gave us the seed money for it. We'd have to apply for a different project. And the emphasis is basically what you just said, economic development. Did I get that correct?
That's what I said, but Daniel, do you want to add any clarification on that one?
No, I mean, I think that's the idea, and I know, some projects can have multiple phases, but I think the idea of these small seed grants is to get the project started with some seed funding, and then you're going to go after additional funding for the other phases, right? Which is a little different than our capital outlay that Lucas presented, right? When we're talking about larger infrastructure projects. But for this, yes, you do want to make sure, like I know you guys got, I think it was facade money last year. So you want to pick a different project. We wouldn't fund another facade project, even though it was a different set of buildings.
Okay, cool. And I know all of us have a bunch of different projects to pick on, right? And then the last thing is, I didn't know this school was canceled for the rest of the semester till I read your email. So thank you for letting us know.
Any other questions? So some of you have your own system on mute. I've unmuted everybody. But if you're trying to say something, then look at your screen and look for that little microphone and hit the microphone. It'll unmute it. No other questions?
Yes, Eduardo,
Go
this is Flo in Farmington. I had a question. I know the virus that is going on right now, there's so many changes happening, and the grant proposal that we wanted to submit was going to start possibly in July because of the delay. We're giving it 1 month. Should there be any additional delays? Is that something that we'll be kind of addressing later on if we do receive the funds for it?
Yeah, so I can jump in on that one, and maybe Daniel can add some comments to that as well. So first of all, we know that you already submitted your proposal, and we want to give you the opportunity to revise it, given that the funding priorities came out after you submitted that proposal. But yet, again, we're looking for projects to start now, and that can move to kind of deal with what we're dealing with now. But there is flexibility on the completion deadlines on those pieces. And Daniel, I don't know if there's anything you want to add from your perspective on that one.
I just think I know, and I think everybody should know, and I think we understand that we all have plans and we all have things in place that we wanted to do, but I think we all have to come to the realization that what we wanted to do may not be exactly what we need to be doing right now. So in that sense, I would just encourage everybody that even though you had plans or you wanted to do this certain project, if it's not a priority, you might want to reconsider a different project that could have more immediate effects. Because I think we don't want to go over and extend deadlines. We want to get this money spent fast is the emphasis.
Okay, thank you. I probably will send a revision for that. So thank you very much.
Sure thing, thanks.
Lisa Pellegrino sent a note in on the chat, and she said to Lucas, on the capital out request, the presentation gave a phase 3 option for funding to private developers. In the past, we have only been able to fund publicly owned projects. Is this a new change? Just wanted to make sure I understood that correctly. Lucas, can you clarify that one?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I had to unmute myself. Sorry, yeah, it's not going to private developers directly. There's so the phase 3 is really where you should be looking to leverage these projects with private investment, really. So no, it's not capital outlay money going to a particular project. Capital outlay, yeah, that's not. I'm sorry if I misspoke on that one.
Yeah, just to reiterate, capital outlay is for public infrastructure projects. We are subject to anti-donation clause, so it has to go to public projects. But yeah, but we want to leverage that with private sector reinvestment, I think Lucas can help in connect, in terms of trying to connect other funding on the follow-up projects as well. So I think that's kind of the goal in the future as well.
Okay, any other questions? No questions? Well, then we'll go ahead. First of all, thank you all for joining us for the call. I know it's a long webinar. We had 2 funding projects that we wanted to cover today. If you're for some reason not able to navigate the system and wanted to ask a question and couldn't get through, please email us and we'll get a response to that question. What you will see after this webinar, I'll work with Jessica at New Mexico Main Street to get the presentation out, to get the recording out once that's done processing, and then to get the other reference document on some of the other ideas for new projects out as well. So we will send that out before the end of the day today. I want to thank everybody for joining us today, and thank you, Lucas, for getting us started. And we look forward to seeing all the great work in your communities, and stay safe and stay healthy, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.